The air in the Nova-Corp headquarters doesn't smell like oxygen. It smells like money, expensive cologne, and the cold metallic scent of power. My name is Maya, and every morning at 4 a.m., before the sun even dares to touch the New York skyline, I am here. I wear blue overalls that are 2 sizes too big, a heavy belt of cleaning supplies, and a pair of worn-out sneakers that make no sound on the polished Italian marble. To the world, I am a janitor. I am the girl who scrubs the coffee stains left by men who earn in a minute what I earn in a year. I am the shadow that empties the trash cans filled with shredded dreams and billion-dollar secrets. They walk past me without a glance. They talk about their illegal mergers, their secret affairs, and their offshore accounts right in front of me, because to them, I am just a piece of furniture, a human-shaped vacuum cleaner. But they have no idea who is really watching them. 20 years ago, I didn't live in a basement apartment. I lived in a penthouse that touched the clouds. My father, Sebastian Vance, was the king of this city. He was a man of vision, a man who built Nova-Corp from a garage startup into a global titan. I remember the smell of his expensive cigars and the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. But most of all, I remember my mother. She was the soul of the company, the architect, who wrote the code that changed the world. I can still hear the screech of tires and the smell of burning rubber. They said the brakes failed. They said it was a tragedy. But I saw the man in the black suit standing by the wreckage before the police arrived. I saw the way he smiled as the flames climbed higher. My father, broken by grief and surrounded by vultures who wanted his throne, did the only thing he could to save me. He erased me. He faked my death and hid me in the foster care system under the name Maya. "Wait, my little bird," he had whispered to me in the middle of the night before the lawyers took me away. "The wolves are everywhere. They have infiltrated our home. I will stay and fight, but you must stay hidden. Become invisible. Become the shadow they never suspect. When the time is right, I will call for you." For 20 years, the call never came. My father married again, a woman named Isabella, a cold, calculating socialite with a heart made of dry ice. She brought her son, Ethan, into the Vance household, and together they slowly pushed my father into a corner. Now, Sebastian Vance is dying. They say it's a rare neurological disease. They say his mind is fading. But as I scrubbed the floor of his private office last night, I found something they missed. Under the heavy mahogany desk, hidden in the crevices of the wood, I found a tiny, discarded plastic cap. It's the cap of a syringe, a type of neurotoxin that mimics the symptoms of dementia. They aren't waiting for him to die. They are executing him in broad daylight. And the worst part, my father looks at me every day when I come in to clean his office, and he doesn't recognize his own daughter. The toxin has clouded his eyes, but it hasn't clouded mine. I stood in the center of the boardroom tonight, the moon casting long, jagged shadows across the table. I looked at the chair where my father once sat with pride. I looked at my reflection in the dark windows. The girl in the blue overalls was gone. In her place was a woman who had spent 20 years learning the secrets of her enemies. "The wolves have had their feast," I whispered to the empty room, my voice sounding like a ghost's promise. "But the shadow is coming for the throne." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. I had planted it under the boardroom table a week ago. I hit play. "How much longer, Mother?" Ethan's voice rang out, clear and arrogant. "The gala is in 3 days," Isabella replied, her voice like silk over a blade. "Once he signs the power of attorney at the party, we increase the dosage. He'll go to sleep and never wake up. And that little brat Maya? She's been dead for 20 years. The Vance legacy ends with us." I gripped the recorder until my knuckles turned white. They think I am dead. They think they are safe. They have no idea that the girl who cleans their toilets is the one who is about to burn their world down. The basement of Nova-Corp is a place where the sunlight never reaches. It is a labyrinth of humming pipes, flickering fluorescent lights, and the heavy smell of damp concrete. This is my kingdom. While the executives above dream of gold and glory, I exist among the skeletons of their secrets. After discovering the neurotoxin cap, I knew I couldn't go to the police. Isabella Vance has spent the last decade putting the city's highest officials on her payroll. If I walked into a precinct in my blue overalls, I would be silenced before I could even finish my sentence. No, to take down a god, you have to become a devil. I spent the next 48 hours in a trance of focused fury. Every night, after my shift ended at midnight, I didn't go home to my cramped apartment. Instead, I stayed in the archive room, a forgotten chamber in the sub-basement where the paper records of the 1990s were left to rot. Using a master key I had borrowed and duplicated months ago, I entered the room. It was filled with the smell of old parchment and the silence of the dead. I wasn't looking for money. I was looking for the sterling protocols. These were the original encryption codes my mother had written before her death. She always told me that every lock she built had a heartbeat, a secret rhythm that only a sterling could hear. I found the box buried under layers of corporate tax returns. Inside was a single black ledger. My mother's handwriting was neat, elegant, and filled with a warmth that made my heart ache. As I turned the pages, I realized what she had done. She hadn't just built Nova-Corp security. She had built a backdoor that only opened for her bloodline. "I see you, Mom," I whispered into the darkness. "I see the path you left for me." I needed a face. I couldn't appear as Maya the janitor. I needed to create an identity that would terrify Isabella, a ghost from the past that she couldn't explain. I used the dark web terminals in the server room to reach out to an old family friend, Mr. Henderson. He had been my father's head of security before the accident, a man who had been fired by Isabella the moment she married into the family. He was living in poverty in Queens, a broken man who thought he had failed his greatest friend. I sent him an encrypted message. "The little bird is out of the cage. Meet me at the old library at 2 a.m. When he saw me, he collapsed into a chair. He looked at my face, so much like my mother's, and then at my rough, calloused hands from years of scrubbing floors. "Maya?" he gasped, his voice trembling. We thought you were truly gone. Sebastian, he never spoke of you. He became a shell." "He was protecting me, Henderson," I said, my voice cold and steady. "But now it's my turn to protect him. Isabella is poisoning him. I have the proof. But I need you to be my hands on the outside. I have $10 million sitting in a dormant account my mother left me. We are going to buy an army." With Henderson's help, we began the tapping. I didn't just clean Ethan's office, I dismantled it. I found the hidden microphones Isabella had placed to spy on her own son. I found the ledger of Ethan's gambling debts, millions owed to the very people Nova-Corp was supposed to be fighting. I decided to play my first card. I sent an anonymous digital package to Ethan's private phone. It contained a single video, the footage of him stealing from the company's pension fund to pay off a bookie in Macau. Along with the video was a message. "The janitor sees everything, Ethan. If you want this to stay in the trash, meet me in the basement archives. Bring the key to the Vance private vault. Don't tell your mother, or the video goes to the SEC at dawn." The basement confrontation. The air in the basement felt heavy as midnight approached. I stood behind a row of heavy metal shelving, my face hidden by the shadow of a ventilation duct. Ethan arrived, looking frantic. He was dressed in a tuxedo from some gala, his silk tie disheveled. He looked around the dirty, dim room with a sneer of disgust. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Show yourself. I have the key. Now give me the original file." I didn't step out. I stayed in the dark. "The file isn't for sale, Ethan," I said, my voice distorted by a small electronic device. "But your life is. You think you're the next king of New York? You're just a pawn Isabella is going to sacrifice the moment she gets your father's signature. She doesn't love you. She loves the throne." "You're lying!" Ethan screamed, stepping closer to the shadows. "My mother is doing this for us." "Then why did she take out a life insurance policy on you last Tuesday?" I tossed a folder out of the darkness. It slid across the dusty floor, stopping at his feet. Ethan picked it up, his hands shaking. As he read the documents, forged by Isabella to look like he was planning a suicide, his face went from red to a ghostly, sickly white. "She wouldn't," he whispered. "She already has," I said. "Now, give me the key. If you want to live to see the sunrise, you're going to help me destroy her. You're going to give me the invitation to the inheritance gala, and you're going to tell me exactly where she keeps the blue vial." Ethan looked at the darkness where I stood. He didn't see a janitor. He saw a nightmare he couldn't escape. He dropped the gold key on the floor and backed away. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a pathetic whimper. "I'm the person you've been walking past for 3 years," I replied. "And I'm the last thing you'll ever see coming." As he ran back to the elevator, I stepped out into the dim light. I picked up the key. It was the key to my father's private study, the place where the real power of attorney was kept. The transition from a ghost to a queen is not made of silk and diamonds. It is made of iron and blood. For the last 72 hours, I have lived in a state of hyperfocus. My hands, once cracked and stained by the harsh chemicals of industrial cleaners, have been meticulously treated. Every callus, every scar, earned from scrubbing the floors of Nova-Corp, was a badge of honor I had to temporarily hide. Henderson, my father's old head of security, had transformed my secret warehouse into a tactical dressing room. "You have to walk like you own the sky, Maya," Henderson said, his voice thick with emotion as he watched me. "A janitor looks at the floor. A queen looks through people as if they are glass." I stood before the full-length mirror, and for the first time in 20 years, I didn't see the girl in the blue overalls. I wore a gown of liquid gold, a fabric so fine it felt like a second skin, yet heavy enough to feel like armor. It was the color of the sunrise my father used to describe to me. Around my neck was the only piece of jewelry that mattered, my mother's locket, which Henderson had kept hidden in a floorboard for 2 decades. Inside that locket wasn't a photo, it was a microchip, the kill switch for the Nova-Corp mainframe. "The gala is at the Metropolitan Museum," Henderson whispered, checking the earpiece tucked into my hair. "Isabella has tripled security. They have facial recognition at every entrance. But they are looking for threats from the outside. They aren't looking for the girl they think died in a car fire." The museum was a fortress of light. Searchlights cut through the New York night, and the red carpet was a river of silk and ego. I stepped out of a black vintage limousine, the very model my father used to drive. The paparazzi went into a frenzy. They didn't know who I was, but the AI-driven fashion blogs were already flagging my dress as the mystery of the night. I walked toward the main entrance. The security guard, a man named Miller, whom I had shared coffee with in the basement just a week ago, held out his hand for my invitation. I handed him the gold-embossed card I had extorted from Ethan. Miller looked at the card, then at my face. For a split second, I saw a flash of recognition in his eyes. I had scrubbed the coffee stains off his desk 100 times. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Enjoy the evening, Miss Sterling," he said, bowing slightly. He didn't recognize me. He only saw the wealth. The blue overalls were a better mask than any piece of lace. The ballroom was a sea of masks and whispers. In the center of the room, on a raised dais, sat my father. My heart shattered into a million pieces when I saw him. Sebastian Vance, the lion of industry, was slumped in a velvet chair. His eyes were glazed, his skin a sickly grey. He looked like a statue of a man waiting to be buried. Beside him stood Isabella. She was dressed in blood-red lace, her hand resting on my father's shoulder like a predator claiming its kill. She was holding a fountain pen, waiting for the clock to strike midnight. That was when the cameras would go live for the historic transition of power. I moved through the crowd like a shark in silk. I could hear the conversations. The vultures were already discussing how to carve up the company once Isabella took over. "I heard the son is incompetent," one senator whispered. "Doesn't matter," a banker replied. "Isabella is the one with the teeth. Once she signs the power of attorney, the old man is going to peacefully pass within the week." I felt a surge of cold, white-hot rage. I reached into my clutch and activated the signal jammer Henderson had built. The lights flickered. The giant LED screens behind the dais, which were supposed to show a tribute video to my father's legacy, suddenly turned to static. The music died, replaced by a low, humming frequency that made the champagne glasses on the tables vibrate. Isabella stiffened. "What is this? Ethan, fix the feed." But Ethan was standing in the corner, his face pale, staring at me. He knew. I stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the stage. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Every eye in the room followed the girl in gold. I climbed the stairs, the sound of my heels on the wood sounding like a drumbeat of war. "Stop," I said. My voice wasn't a scream. It was a command that filled every corner of the room. Isabella turned, her eyes narrowed. "Who are you? This is a private ceremony. Security, remove this woman." I didn't move. I looked directly at my father. "Dad," I whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. "The little bird has come home." Sebastian's head lolled to the side. For a second, the fog in his eyes cleared. His hand, thin and trembling, reached out toward me. "Maya?"
The room went deathly silent. You could hear the drop of a pin.
Isabella's face went from confusion to a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. She looked at me, really looked at me, and saw the woman she thought she had murdered 20 years ago. "You're dead," Isabella hissed, her voice cracking. "You died in the fire. I saw the report." "You saw what my father wanted you to see," I said, stepping onto the dais. I turned to the crowd, to the cameras that were still streaming to the global markets. "My name is Maya Vance. I am the daughter of Sebastian and Elena Vance, and I have spent the last 3 years cleaning the floors of Nova-Corp, watching you all plan a murder." I pointed at the screen behind us. The static cleared. It wasn't a tribute video. It was a high-definition recording from the hidden camera in Isabella's dressing room, showing her carefully measuring the blue neurotoxin into my father's nightly tea. The crowd erupted. Isabella lunged for the pen, desperate to sign the paper before the police arrived, but I was faster. I grabbed her wrist with the strength of a woman who had spent years lifting heavy equipment. "The cleaning is over, Isabella," I whispered in her ear. "Now it's time to take out the trash." The night of the gala didn't end with a celebration. It ended with the sound of sirens and the crashing of stock prices. As Isabella was dragged away by the authorities, the world watched in real time. But a billionaire's empire doesn't just hand itself over because of a dramatic reveal. The wolves of Nova-Corp, the board of directors who had been complicit in Isabella's rise, were already gathering in the shadows of the 81st floor. They thought that without Isabella, they could simply claim the company for themselves, citing my father's incapacity and my long absence as reasons to block my inheritance. They didn't realize that I wasn't just coming for my father's chair. I was coming for the entire building. While the police processed Isabella at the precinct, I didn't go to a hotel. I went back to the basement. I swapped my liquid gold gown for my old blue overalls. Henderson looked at me with confusion. "Why the uniform, Maya? You're the CEO now." "I'm not the CEO yet, Henderson," I said, pulling a heavy wrench from my toolkit. "Right now, I'm the ghost in the machine. The board is meeting in the executive boardroom in 10 minutes to vote on a crisis CEO. They've blocked the elevators and locked the stairwells. They think they've shut me out. I knew a secret they didn't. The ventilation shaft for the main server room, which controls the building's smart lock system, had a faulty latch on the 4th floor. I had fixed it weeks ago, so it would only open from the inside. I climbed. The air in the shafts was hot and tasted of dust and electricity. For 3 hours, I moved through the lungs of the building I had spent 3 years cleaning. I reached the server hub, the brain of Nova-Corp. Using my mother's kill switch microchip from the locket, I plugged directly into the mainframe. "Hello, Nova," I whispered. The screens in the room flickered to life. I didn't just have access, I had total command. I initiated Protocol 0. Every door in the building locked. Every elevator froze. The board of directors was now trapped in the 80-floor boardroom, surrounded by glass windows and no escape. I turned on the intercom system. My voice, calm and steady, echoed through the speakers of the boardroom, where 12 terrified men were shouting at each other. "Gentlemen," I said, "I believe you are about to vote on my future. I suggest you look at your tablets." On their screens, I didn't show them the poison video. I showed them their own trash. For 3 years, I had been collecting the documents they thought they had shredded. I showed them the ledgers of the ghost employees they used to embezzle funds. I showed them the emails where they discussed selling Nova-Corp secrets to Apex Industries. "You have 2 choices," I continued, watching them through the security cameras. "You can vote to confirm me as the permanent chairwoman and CEO of Nova-Corp, effective immediately, and I will hand these files over to my lawyers to negotiate your quiet resignations. Or I can hit the send button to the Department of Justice right now, and the NYPD will be waiting for you in the lobby when I decide to unlock the elevators." One by one, the hands went up. The vote was unanimous. I didn't walk into the boardroom as the girl in gold. I walked in as the janitor. I pushed my cleaning cart through the double mahogany doors, the wheels squeaking on the marble floor. The board members stood in stunned silence as I stopped at the head of the table, the seat Isabella had occupied just hours before. I picked up the Vortex pen, the one used to sign billion-dollar deals, and I didn't sign a contract. I signed a termination notice for every person in the room. "You're fired," I said, looking at the CFO, the man who had betrayed my father for 30 years. "Pack your things, but leave the company laptops. Security will escort you to the basement exit. It's the only one that's open." As they shuffled out, broken and defeated, I sat in my father's chair. The sun was beginning to rise over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. I looked at the table, now empty of vultures. I picked up the phone and called the hospital. "How is he?" "He's awake, Miss Vance," the doctor said, his voice filled with awe. "The toxin is clearing. He's asking for his daughter." I closed my eyes, a single tear of relief falling onto the marble table I had once scrubbed for minimum wage. The coup was over. The company was mine. But as I looked at the CFO's abandoned tablet, a final notification popped up. It was a message from an encrypted source at Apex Industries. "The janitor may have the keys to the house, but she doesn't know who owns the land." The war was far from over.
The victory in the boardroom felt like a cold sunrise. The wolves of Nova-Corp had been purged, and the glass towers of Manhattan stood silent, as if holding their breath. But the message on the CFO's tablet, "She doesn't know who owns the land," burned in my mind like a brand. I realized that Isabella and the board were merely the infantry. The real general was still out there, hidden in the shadow of a rival empire called Apex Industries. I spent the first week of my reign not in the CEO's office, but in the sterile, white-walled silence of the hospital. My father, Sebastian, was finally coming back to the surface. The neurotoxin was a heavy fog that had to be burned away. I sat by his bed every night, my hands, still rough and healing, resting in his. "Maya," he whispered one evening, his voice a ghost of its former self. "I saw you, in the overalls. I saw you every day in my office. I thought I was hallucinating. I thought the grief had finally turned into a person." "I was there, Dad," I said, a lump forming in my throat. "I was there the whole time. You told me to become the shadow, so I did." He looked at me with a mixture of pride and profound sorrow. "I never wanted you to live in the dirt, Maya. I wanted to protect you from them, from the architect." My blood ran cold. "The architect? Isabella mentioned that name. Who is he?" "He isn't a man," Sebastian coughed, his eyes darting to the door as if the walls themselves had ears. "It's a collective. A group of men who believe that technology should be controlled by the few, not the many. Your mother, she didn't die in an accident because of greed. She died because she was going to release the open source code for the global satellite network. She was going to give the world free internet, free information. They couldn't let her destroy their monopoly." I realized then that my fight wasn't about a company, it was about a legacy of freedom. I left the hospital with a new mission. I didn't go back to scrubbing floors, but I didn't put on a business suit either. I returned to my secret warehouse with Henderson. "We need to find the headquarters of Apex," I said, spreading the blueprints of the city on a rusted metal table. "But they don't have a building. They are a ghost company." Henderson pulled out a series of intercepted signals. "They don't need a building, Maya. They operate off the grid, using a decommissioned oil rig in the North Atlantic. That's where they keep their main servers. That's where the Architect Collective meets." I looked at the map. The oil rig was a fortress guarded by mercenaries and high-tech surveillance. To get in, I couldn't be a CEO, and I couldn't be a janitor. I had to become something else. Using the millions I had recovered from Isabella's offshore accounts, I didn't buy jewelry. I bought a specialized stealth submersible and a team of ex-special forces who had been wronged by the corporate world. We trained for 2 weeks in the freezing waters off the coast of Maine. I practiced something my mother had taught me when I was a child, a code-breaking technique called the pulse. It allowed me to listen to the electromagnetic frequency of any electronic lock and find the gap in the rhythm. On a stormy Tuesday night, we launched the mission. The North Atlantic was a monster of black waves and freezing spray. We approached the rig from underwater. I climbed the rusted metal ladder of the rig's underside, the salt stinging my eyes, the ghost of my mother's voice whispering in my ear. Everything has a heartbeat, Maya. Find it, and you own the machine. I slipped through the ventilation shafts, a skill I had perfected in the Nova-Corp tower. I moved like a predator, silent and invisible. I reached the central server room, a cathedral of blinking blue lights and humming cooling fans. In the center of the room sat a man. He was old, dressed in a simple grey sweater, looking more like a grandfather than a corporate assassin. He was staring at a photo of my mother. "I knew you'd come, Maya," he said without turning around. "You have your mother's scent, the scent of vanilla and defiance." "You killed her," I said, my hand resting on the silenced pistol at my hip. "I tried to save her," he replied, turning around. His face was scarred, a map of old fires. "I am the one who helped your father fake your death. I was the man in the suit you saw at the wreckage. I didn't smile because she was dead. I smiled because I knew I had successfully pulled you out of the car before it exploded." The world tilted. "What?" "I am the rogue member of the collective," he explained, holding out a data drive. "I've been waiting 20 years for you to be ready. Isabella was a mistake, a loose cannon I used to keep the others distracted while you grew up in the shadows. This drive contains the Phoenix Code. It's the final version of your mother's work. If you upload this to the global satellite, the architects lose their power forever. But there's a catch." "What catch?" I asked, my heart hammering. "Once the code is live, Nova-Corp will be worth 0. The global market for information will crash. You will go from being a billionaire to a woman with nothing but a library card and the clothes on your back. You will be invisible again. Are you willing to give up the throne to save the world?" I looked at the drive. I thought of the marble floors I had scrubbed. I thought of the men in suits who thought they were gods. And I thought of my father who just wanted his little bird to be free. "I was never comfortable on a throne," I said, taking the drive. "I'm a janitor. I'm used to cleaning up messes." As I reached for the terminal to upload the code, the alarms began to scream. The architects had found us.